Emily loved dolls. She had dozens, carefully arranged on shelves in her room. But none of them were like the doll she found at the flea market. It was old and porcelain, with glassy blue eyes that seemed to follow her every move. The doll wore a tattered lace dress and had a single red ribbon tied in its golden hair. Emily was immediately drawn to it.
"She's perfect," Emily whispered, clutching the doll tightly.
As Emily handed the vendor a crumpled $5 bill, the old woman gave her a chilling warning.
"Be careful, child," she rasped, her voice like dry leaves. "Some toys are best left unplayed with."
Emily, caught up in the excitement of her new treasure, brushed off the woman's words. She skipped home, eager to introduce the doll to her other toys. That night, Emily tucked the doll in beside her, its blue eyes gleaming in the moonlight. As she drifted off to sleep, Emily could have sworn she heard a faint whisper.
"Mine," the voice seemed to say, barely audible above the rustling leaves outside her window.
Emily's friends, Sarah and Michael, came over to play. Emily showed them Anya, her newest acquisition.
"Wow, she's creepy," Michael said, wrinkling his nose. "I don't like her eyes. They're weird."
Sarah, always the braver one, picked up the doll and examined it closely.
"She's kinda cool, actually," Sarah admitted. "But I think you're right about the eyes, Michael. They're a little freaky."
Emily, determined to prove her friends wrong, held Anya close.
"Don't be silly," Emily said, forcing a smile. "She's just an old doll. There's nothing creepy about her."
But deep down, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The whispers were getting louder, more insistent.
"Mine, mine, mine," the voice hissed, echoing in Emily's ears.
That night, Emily tried to sleep, but the whispers were relentless.
"Mine, Emily, mine," the voice hissed, sending chills down her spine.
Emily threw the covers over her head, trying to block out the sound. But the voice seemed to penetrate through the layers of blankets, growing louder and more menacing. Suddenly, Emily felt a cold hand on her arm. She screamed, throwing the blankets off and scrambling back against the headboard. There, standing at the foot of her bed, was Anya. The doll's blue eyes glowed ominously in the darkness, and her porcelain face seemed twisted into a sinister grin.
"What do you want?" Emily cried, her voice trembling with fear.
The doll tilted its head, the whispers growing louder.
"You are mine, Emily," Anya hissed, her voice raspy and cold. Emily scrambled out of bed, backing away from the doll. Anya glided across the room, her porcelain limbs moving with an unnatural grace. She raced to the door, fumbling with the doorknob, but it wouldn't budge. The door was locked. "Let me out!" Emily screamed, banging on the door. "Help me!"
Anya was getting closer, her blue eyes burning into Emily's soul. Emily backed away until she was trapped against the wall, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. Emily slowly opened her eyes, her body trembling. Anya was gone. The room was silent, the only sound the gentle hum of the nightlight. The next morning, Emily decided to get rid of the doll. She wrapped Anya in an old newspaper and snuck out of the house. She ran all the way to the park, her heart pounding in her chest. Emily found a trash can and threw the doll inside. She watched as the garbage truck swallowed Anya whole, relief washing over her. She raced back home, hoping that she had finally seen the last of the creepy doll. But as she approached her house, she noticed something strange. There, sitting on her bed, was Anya. The doll's blue eyes seemed to mock her, a triumphant smirk on her porcelain face. Emily's blood ran cold. She had thrown the doll away. She had seen the garbage truck take it away. And yet, there it was, back in her room as if nothing had happened. Emily realized with a growing sense of dread that she was trapped. Anya would never leave her alone. The doll was hers now, and there was nothing Emily could do about it.
"Forever," Anya whispered, her voice a chilling lullaby.
Lucy loved exploring antique shops. She loved the musty smell, the dusty treasures, and the stories hidden within each object. One rainy Saturday, she stumbled upon a peculiar shop tucked away on a quiet street. The sign above the door creaked ominously in the wind, its faded paint barely visible. Intrigued, Lucy stepped inside. The shop was dimly lit, filled with an eclectic collection of antiques. Lucy wandered through the aisles, her fingers trailing over dusty furniture and chipped china. In the corner, she spotted a beautiful antique mirror. Its ornate frame was crafted from dark wood, and the glass had an ethereal glow. Lucy was immediately drawn to it, feeling an inexplicable connection to the old mirror.
"That's a fine mirror you've got your eye on," he rasped, his voice raspy with age. "But be warned, child. It's got a history, that one does. Some say it's cursed."
Lucy, captivated by the mirror's beauty, dismissed the shopkeeper's warning as mere superstition. She purchased the mirror, ignoring the uneasy feeling that settled in her stomach. As she carried the mirror home, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something was watching her. Lucy hung the mirror in her bedroom, its presence instantly transforming the space. The room felt different now, colder somehow. As she gazed into the mirror, she noticed that her reflection was off. It wasn't just the dim lighting or the age of the glass. Her reflection seemed to have a life of its own. At first, it was just subtle things, a flicker of movement in the corner of her eye, a whisper that seemed to come from within the mirror itself. But as the days turned into nights, the strange occurrences intensified. Lucy's reflection would move independently, mimicking her actions, but with a sinister twist. Shadows danced at the edge of the mirror's reflection, taking on grotesque shapes that sent shivers down her spine. One night, Lucy awoke to the sound of her name being whispered. The voice was soft, almost inaudible, but it seemed to come from the mirror.
Terrified, I jumped out of bed and ran to the door. I fumbled with the doorknob, my hands shaking so badly I could barely turn it. Finally, the door swung open, and I raced out of the room. I slammed the door shut behind me, my back pressed against the cold wood.
She could hear the tapping sound from the mirror, relentless and menacing.
I decided to sleep on the couch that night, as far away from the mirror as possible. But it didn't matter. Everywhere I looked, I saw the shadowy figure in the reflection. It was in the windows, in the television screen, even in the polished surface of my phone. The figure was always there, watching me, its skeletal fingers tapping, tapping, tapping.
Lucy tried covering the mirror with a sheet, but the tapping continued, muffled but still audible. She tried turning the mirror to face the wall, but it didn't help. The old folks in the village had always warned them about the phantom of the woods. They said it was a shadowy figure, tall and gaunt, with eyes that glowed like embers in the night. Legend had it that the phantom lured unsuspecting travelers deep into the woods, never to be seen again. The villagers whispered tales of strange noises emanating from the woods at night, rustling leaves, disembodied whispers, and blood-curdling screams that sent chills down their spines.
We scoffed at the stories, considering ourselves above such superstitious nonsense. To prove our bravery, Sarah, David, and I decided to venture into the woods one moonless night, determined to debunk the myth of the phantom.
Armed with flashlights and a healthy dose of skepticism, they plunged into the darkness, their laughter echoing through the silent trees. The forest seemed to close in around them, the darkness suffocating, the air thick with the smell of damp earth and decaying leaves. The further they ventured into the woods, the more oppressive the atmosphere became.
"I think we're lost,"
Sarah whispered, her voice trembling slightly. Mark, determined to maintain his composure, consulted the compass he had brought along.
Don't worry, the compass will lead us back to the trail.
But even as he spoke, a knot of fear tightened in his stomach. The compass needle spun erratically, unable to find its bearings. They continued on, their pace quickening as panic began to set in. The forest seemed to press in on them, the trees like silent sentinels watching their every move. Strange shapes seemed to form in the shadows, and every rustle of leaves sounded like approaching footsteps.
My light!
David, the youngest of the group, stumbled over a gnarled root, his flashlight flying out of his hand and disappearing into the darkness.
"We have to find it. We can't find our way out of here without it."
They stumbled through the darkness, their flashlights casting eerie shadows that danced and twisted around them. The screams continued, each one sending a fresh wave of terror through their veins. The woods seemed to close in around them, the air thick with the smell of fear and decay. Suddenly, the screams stopped. An eerie silence descended upon the forest, broken only by the sound of their own ragged breathing. They emerged into a small clearing, their flashlights illuminating a scene that sent shivers down their spines. In the center of the clearing stood a towering figure, shrouded in shadow. Its eyes glowed with an unnatural light, piercing the darkness like burning embers. The figure raised its hand, its long, bony fingers beckoning them closer. The teenagers stood frozen, their minds reeling in terror. This was no campfire story, no figment of their imaginations. This was the Phantom of the Woods, and it had come for them.
We turned to run, our legs pumping furiously, but the forest seemed to conspire against us. The trees seemed to reach out, their branches like skeletal arms, pulling us back into the darkness.